The vessel's registered as the Chetzemoka, and is broadcasting a message on a loop. Message follows. Holden's knuckles hurt, and he forced himself to relax his fists. Naomi's voice filled the ops deck, and it was like being on the verge of passing out from dehydration and being handed a glass of water. As dire as the message was, Holden still felt every syllable untying his knots. When Naomi's message was done, he fell back in his couch, limp as a rag. She was in trouble, but it was trouble they could fix. She was on her way back toward him. "Thank you, Mr. Patel," Holden said. "In thanks, you may now have all my stuff. I don't care about any of it anymore." "Including the coffee maker, sir?" "Almost all my stuff." Hey guys, Pete here. It's time to break down The Expanse Season 5, Episode 8, Hard Vacuum. We're inching closer to the crew of the Roci coming back together, or maybe Marco's plan will work out and the Chetzemoka bomb will take out the majority of our main players. That seems unlikely, but I'll readily admit that I would be okay with watching a Season 6 that involved Avasarala, Amos, and Drummer hunting down the Free Navy. Before we get into what happened in Episode 8, this is your spoiler warning. If you're not completely caught up with the Expanse TV series through Season 5's 8th episode, then this video won't be for you. As someone who's read all the books, I will be referring to them, but I won't be giving away any future spoilers. With all that out of the way, let's get started. We are officially setting the table for the endgame, and that means we do check in with all the different stories in this episode. Let's look towards the inner planets first. We catch up with Amos and Clarissa, who are biking their way to Baltimore. Things are looking pretty deserted. There aren't very many people around. They stop to take a leak and don't feel the need to stay out of view. We find out that Peaches is starting to feel like herself. She's starting to feel better now that the blocker meds are leaving her system. Outside what they think is an old people's home, they come across some dead bodies, which doesn't feel like a great sign for things to come, and they decide that they need to get off the planet. Later, when they arrive at Eric's headquarters, where we see that Baltimore looks pretty destroyed, she brings up Winnipesaukee Island, and this is what she was talking to Amos about earlier when she said that she had an idea of where they could find the ship. Eric is essentially in denial about what's really happening, and he lays it out in a way that's relatable. He spent his whole life building this up. He came from nothing. He built up this criminal enterprise. Being the leader of a gang is a pretty chaotic existence in normal times, so he does have some skills that would lend themselves to a near apocalypse. But from what he says, it sounds like most of his territory is gone. Clarissa tells him a story from prison, which is straight out of the books, and I always liked how it emphasized how transformative the asteroid attack is. She tells Eric about a woman she was locked up with that killed her children. The woman talked about them like they were still alive, and this made Clarissa think she was crazy, until one day she comes up to her and she says, "I know they're dead, but I know I'm dead too. You're the only bitch in here who thinks she's still alive." In that moment, Clarissa realized that who she was before she went to prison is basically dead. And as she tells Eric, we see this happening to him as well. He realizes that everything he's built up has been wiped away, and he's gonna have to go and do something else. I've been working on an Amos and Peaches video, and when I was rereading for that, I was really hoping they would include this exchange. I love how this shows what a great pair they make. As she's meeting Eric where he's at, helping to convince him of what needs to happen so they can survive, Amos is over there thinking about what they need to take with them in order to pull it off. And since it's difficult to get good tequila away from Earth, I thought it was hilarious that it's what he's thinking about when his childhood friend is having a breakdown. In the end, Eric is on board, and I couldn't help but notice this helicopter kind of thing that's in the background, and maybe that'll be important. On Luna, we see David Pastor stepping into his role as the acting Secretary General. It's like he fixes his hair and he becomes a new person. But seriously, as he's giving this speech, which is moving, we see him sort of starting to believe it himself, that he is the leader of the UN. Avasarala is also impressed and says that the people saw the leader they needed to see. And he closes by saying, "Now we just have to make good on what I said." In their meeting, there's a disagreement over proportional response plans. The Secretary General feels like they have to show the citizens that they can go on the offensive, while Avasarala doesn't want to send the wrong message. She doesn't want to kill innocent Belters, which is what Delgado's plan will do. It's an interesting exchange. Marco is trying to position himself as the military arm of the Belters, but there's no central government to hold accountable. People who live in the Belt didn't choose Marco to be their leader, and most of them wouldn't have agreed with his violent methods. Later, when you see Pastor talk to Delgado, Nagato, who, for the record, really wants to blow up Palace Station to send a message, you get the feeling that this might actually do more harm than good. Actions like these could radicalize Belters who are worried about their survival. We saw this with the Drummer faction, and if that happens, Marco could use that to his advantage in unifying the belt. It's a difficult situation, and I guess my takeaway is that Avasarala has the kind of experience that you would hope would be in that room. Speaking of Marco, we get one scene on the Pella where he's looking at Sin's dead body. He appears to be grieving the loss of his crewmate and asks Filip what he saw. He explains that Sin went after her, tried to stop her, but that Naomi opened the door and went outside. She wanted to die, and he doesn't understand why she had to kill Sin. Marco quickly turns and says that she didn't kill him, you did. And this is interesting because most of the times when we've seen Marco and Filip together, he's kind of played the loving father. Here we just see cruelty. I guess we'll have to wait and see why that is. That's all the Marco and Filip we get in this episode, and I guess we can gather that her escape did work. They do think that she killed herself at this point. Elsewhere in space, on the Rocinante, Holden and crew don't see signs of the protomolecule in the blast zone of the Zmeya. There's some discussion about whether the sample could be destroyed in this way, and Holden says that's exactly how they've done it successfully in the past. Based on the flight information, they don't think it could have been passed off somewhere else, and it seems like this is enough evidence for Jim, because really, he's just worried about Naomi. He says to set a course for the Razorback, and we see a look on Monica's face that says she's not satisfied that the story of the protomolecule sample is over yet. On top of that, Bull reveals that he doesn't like the idea of going on a suicide mission to save Naomi, and as he points out later, they did use a lot of bullets in their last engagement. On the Razorback, Alex and Bobbie aren't having much luck looking for the Chetzemoka. Bobbie decides to check the radio, thinking that if the Free Navy had attacked some ships, then they would be sending out distress calls. When she's doing that, she comes across the distress call from the Chetzemoka. She passes the message on to the Rocinante, and this is where that excerpt that I opened the video came from. Now, Holden has something that he thinks he can fix, and they don't even have to confirm what he's going to do because you can just look at his face and know that they're going after Naomi at this point. Naomi wakes up on the Chetzemoka. They do a great job of showing how her time in vacuum messed her up. She's in pain, she's swollen, she can barely stand. The ship is moving, so she struggles with the thrust gravity. All the controls are broken, and she realizes it's rigged with explosives. And as we hear her voice coming into focus, we hear the fake distress call using her voice, transmitting a message she never actually recorded. We get an understanding of what Marco's plan was. We spend a decent amount of time watching Naomi fight this impossible situation. It's gripping in her desperation and her struggle through the pain. And Dominique Tipper really delivers an amazing performance. The situation can be summed up like this. The Chetzemoka has been stripped by Belters, and that means nothing that might be useful would be left behind. She's trying to figure out what she can do with the little that she has to work with, and she believes that the explosives are triggered by a proximity sensor. So she's essentially on a bomb, and if anybody comes too close, then they'll be taken out. She does find some vacuum suits, but they don't have air bottles, and she gets one of the radios to work, transmits a warning message, but has no idea if anybody will actually hear that. We watch as she comes up with a plan. She has access to the space between the ship's hulls, where she looks for the wiring for the comm system. The area inside the outer hull is hard vacuum, and the suit that she wears doesn't have an air bottle, but it does have seals. Basically, she just has the air that's inside it when she puts on the helmet, which means she can only go out there and survive for a couple of minutes at a time. After several brutal trips, we see her find the wire she's looking for and how she plans on getting a message out. All she can do is interrupt the transmission, so she changes it so that instead of saying the full message, all they hear is, "This is Naomi Nagata. Tell James Holden I'm in control." And she's only able to do this a few times before she runs out of air again. Before she goes back inside, she disables it so the message stops broadcasting. Really, it's not much, but it is an ingenious solution based on what she had at her disposal. It's a small triumph, but at this point she does know, because she can receive messages, that the Razorback is on its way, and so she has to hope that this change in the message will set off some red flags for them. We do see this message come through on the DeWalt, but there's a lot of stuff that happens within the Drummer faction that we have to talk about before we get there. When we first catch up with them, they're salvaging a bunch of destroyed ships. We learn that they belong to the Matar Kubalea faction, who voted to kill Marco back in Season 4. Drummer corrects things by saying that they're scavengers, not salvagers. Marco kills those that defy him, and they pick the bodies clean. We see that there's tension building within the family. Later, when Oksana talks to Drummer alone, she brings up the idea that, hey, we made this choice together and it was the right choice. And Drummer understands this, but she's still not sure she can do it. Even though Oksana rightly points out that they're still together, they're still alive, and while it's not ideal, that is something. Drummer's struggling, the family's struggling, and Coral is there to kind of piss everybody off at every turn. There's a moment where she's listening to a call on the radio and kind of staring at the captain's chair. And while we're definitely not supposed to like this character, I do really enjoy the performance. The actor is really good at portraying how much this person would get under your skin. She's dedicated to the Free Navy's cause, and she's there to make sure that Drummer and her faction don't get any ideas about double-crossing Marco. In between all the tension, there's this great scene with the water bottle that's sort of sandwiched in between there. I thought it was pretty effective to show that even though they're kind of at each other's throats at this point, they're really not feeling the situation that they're in, that they are in fact a family, and that's built on something, and it's good to see that they all think about that when they're together in this scene. Temporarily, that does seem to help them make peace with their decision. And later, when Coral says that they're supposed to meet up with 2 other Free Navy ships and go to Ceres, Drummer appears to be on board with following her orders, which include engaging with any inner ships they come across. As they're getting ready to do that, though, they hear Naomi's distress call. Drummer immediately wants to go after her, but Coral tells her it's a fake and that Naomi is dead, and she tells her the whole story. In the moment, that's too much for Drummer, and she loses it. She almost shoots her right there, but she doesn't. And then she goes to her cabin, and she gets that bottle that she had given to Ashford, and she starts drinking. Drummer's famous temper. I made a post about this on the post-episode discussion on the subreddit, and another user pointed out that in episode 408, when she's talking to Ashford, she tells him that she only drinks when she's angry, not when she's sad. And if we needed more confirmation, I think we could say without a doubt that Drummer is angry. Later, Coral and Oksana talk. Coral gives her some backstory, telling her that she used to be close with Naomi as well, and essentially why she thinks she only cares about herself. As they're talking, she gets a notification and realizes that the message stopped transmitting. They listen and they see that it has been altered. This makes Oksana wonder if someone could be on the ship. Could it be Naomi? And all Coral can say is, it can't be. It's impossible, because she does believe that Naomi's dead. We hear the message again as the credits come up, and it's a pretty fantastic ending. So, boy, we really are getting close to the end of the season now. What did I think of episode 8? Well, I enjoy the character development stuff since I already know where the story's going, and I wasn't disappointed in any of that here. It's been keeping up a pretty high level of tension, and it does feel like it has some good momentum building going into the end. The political stuff is under the surface, and since this is a story about this crew who now are split up, we want it to matter when they do come back together. I was actually impressed with how well they were able to adapt Naomi's struggle on the Chetzemoka. A lot of that is carried by the performance, but considering we don't have any of her thoughts to guide us through what she's doing, I thought they pulled it off because by the end we could see how little she had to work with and just how much of a badass she is on multiple different levels. She thinks like an engineer and she solves problems in that way. Here, she takes stock of what's available and comes up with something knowing it's not much, but also knowing she's not ready to give up yet either. She's on a bomb and she knows her family is coming to look for her. It's very on brand and it highlights what a great character she is. Talking about on brand, my man Holden is back. He's ready to jump in and get to some rescuing. I don't think it's surprising in any way that he would do exactly that, but at the same time, I think the whole way that section was set up was just screaming that the protomolecule sample hasn't been destroyed. I guess I'll dive a little deeper into that when I put out my next video in a couple of days, but I did think Monica's look there stood out. She looks like she has something on her mind, and I wonder what she knows that she's not telling them. The next episode is titled Winnipesaukee, so I guess that means that Amos, Clarissa, and Eric will make it there. The stuff around the new Secretary General is also pretty interesting. Initially, it seemed like they were showing that this guy was going to sort of step aside and let Avasarala make all the decisions. Now it looks like he might be stepping up into this role, and that might not really go well for him either. I'm curious to see where that all goes because it's a pretty messed up situation. They're still really not talking about how bad the situation on Earth is. We hear things like millions of deaths and counting. We see dead bodies outside an old folks' home where people moved on and didn't bother to bury them or anything. The exterior shot of Baltimore looked pretty bad, but it seems like a choice at this point. It makes me feel like there's going to be a reveal, but we'll have to wait and see. The drummer stuff was all fantastic. What a complicated knot of shit she finds herself in. There is a lot going on over here. All the performances were solid. Cara Gee's always great. I mentioned that I thought Caral was doing a really effective job there. And also Oksana has been great as well. I'm not sure what they're setting up there, but they're definitely setting something up. And I can't wait to see what happens. And I think that's a good place to leave it. Let me know in the comments what you thought about episode 8. Where do you think things are going? What's happening with Drummer? What's going to happen on Luna? What's going to happen on the Chetzemoka? Let me know what you think. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'll have a follow-up video to this in a couple of days, so make sure you check back for that. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.